Good evening, my friends, and welcome to another First Friday here, sponsored by the Town of Woodside's Art and Culture Committee, a group of like-minded volunteers who want to inspire and educate in a variety of subjects. And this evening, we are very fortunate to have the return of Mitch Postel, who is a local historian and is going to be taking us through a museum, the San Mateo Historical Society Museum, located in downtown Redwood City. This is going to be a fascinating tour. The structure itself, the architecture of the old courthouse is quite fascinating. And Mitch is going to share with us some of the secrets that are held within the museum that I hope some of you have visited. And if not, perhaps after this evening's presentation, you will find yourself paying that small fee to engage in the wonders that this museum has to offer. Now, the interesting thing about museum is that often people feel that they're just filled with artifacts. And I disagree. I think when you really enjoy a museum, you're not just looking at artifacts, you're enjoying and experiencing ideas. And so without further ado, here's our good friend, Mitch Postel, to enlighten us about our local history. Thank you very much, Mitch.
Welcome, Woodside Art and Cultural Committee, to the San Mateo County History Museum. It's my great pleasure to guide you through our museum. Here we are on Broadway in Redwood City. Across the street is the beautifully restored Fox Theater, and this is the exterior of the 1910 courthouse building, San Mateo County Fourth Courthouse building, and we have converted that into a museum, and we're going to take you on a little tour. My name is Mitch Postel, by the way. I'm the president of the San Mateo County Historical Association, and we operate this museum and also Woodside Store, which you're very familiar with, I'd hope, and also the Sanchez Adobe in Pacifica. So here we have the original directory for the building. And it says a lot about the building, and also it says a lot about San Mateo County history. When this big courthouse building was created back in 1910, San Mateo County was a very slow-growing county. At that time, there was only about 12,000 people that lived in the county, about the population of today's El Granada and Half Moon Bay. So if you think about that population stretched out from Daly City to East Palo Alto, and from Brisbane all the way to Año Nuevo, you get the idea of how rural a place this was. And considering that, the leadership of San Mateo County felt that if the county was very slow growing in the 19th century, during the 20th century it would be slow growing as well. And so when they created this directory, they chiseled into marble that forevermore on the first floor would be the auditor to the right, the treasurer to the right. And we take a look at all this. This is meant to be permanent. Nothing's ever going to change. And all the functions of county government are listed on this marble slate, right down to the superintendent of schools. Now, if you were to try to fit the 5,000 people who work for San Mateo County into this building today, they'd be standing shoulder to shoulder. And in fact, what happened was that San Mateo County was not a slow-growing county during the 20th century. It was a very rapidly growing county, and this building, as a matter of fact, became obsolescent within just a few years. This gallery is called Journey to Work, and the theme here is, how did San Mateo County become a suburb? Well, everything has to do with transportation when you talk about a suburb, because if you want to live in the country, you're going to be able to, and you want to work in the city, then you're going to have a good modes of transportation to be able to do that. And in this particular particular realm of history, we had a lot of first, last, and onlys, which set us apart and make us important, especially to suburban, the history of the suburb in the West. So here we are. Could you have had a commute originally? Here's El Camino Real at Belmont in 1850. So the answer is no. This is the way that people got around. You're not going to be able to live in the country and work in the city if this is your main mode of transportation. And here we have kind of a cool salute to our equestrian past. I know there's a lot of people that are enthusiastic about the horse in Woodside. And so you might, if you come to the museum, you might enjoy these miniature saddles, which are all Western saddles, and a lot of them used in California. Well, how about during stagecoach days? Here's a stagecoach that ran through San Mateo County. But the answer is still no, because it took 9 hours to get from San Francisco to San Jose. It was very slow. And also, in that famous year of 1849, very expensive, $32 to get from San Francisco down to San Jose. And so lots of things came out of the stagecoach era, which are kind of famous for our history. For example, we have these mile houses that were kind of the beginnings of some of our towns that stretched down the highway, El Camino Real, all the way to San Jose. And each one of them was kind of famous for their saloon and the kinds of things that was served there. This is a bar that actually came out of one of our mile houses. The most famous of these mile houses was the Halfway House. And that watercolor there shows what it looked like. It was actually built within the old mission outpost at San Mateo. And a very clever entrepreneur, his name was Nicholas de Puister, operated the Halfway House, and it became the most popular of all the roadhouses. And he served something there called San Mateo Punch. For those of you that like a cocktail, think about what this might have tasted like. It was a concoction made of gin and milk, all in the days before refrigeration. So you really wonder what that tasted like. Now in this gallery, especially when we get the kids, we concentrate on two things. One is transportation, as we're describing it, and the other is communication. So how did people communicate during stagecoach times? Well, at the Woodside store, they had a bulletin tree, as an example, and they would leave messages on the bulletin tree, and that's how people kind of text message in those days. We had, in San Mateo County, the earliest commuter railroad west of the Mississippi. It was called the San Francisco to San Jose Railroad. San Jose was destined, or they felt was destined, to become the state capital. It didn't fully. It was state capital for a year or so. But San Jose was deemed to be a great destination, and San Francisco, of course, was this great important city. And so this commuter railroad was deemed to be important. And as the tracks went down the peninsula, some of the great families became our first suburbanites. Now, emulating what was happening on the East Coast in places like Philadelphia and Boston and New York, as the railroads extended from those cities, the elite wanted to get their families out of the squalor of the 19th century city and establish great estates, on the tracks from the great cities. And so emulating that here on the West Coast with this first commuter railroad were the great families of the West doing their business in San Francisco, but desiring also to establish estates down the peninsula. And they included the Mills family, Bank of California, and the Crocker family, Transcontinental Railroad, and the Burrells, Swissman and Sears, and then the two at the end, Ralston and Flood. Those were Silver Kings, and from the Comstock load. And to just give you a sense of the magnitude of the wealth of some of these individuals, Flood, in the days when the average American worker was making $1 a day, Flood in the 1870s was making $500,000 a month off of his holdings in the Comstock, all in the days before income taxes. This is incredible wealth, just incredible. Who were our first commuters then? Well, they were kind of these big shot elite people. I mean, it wasn't like today's commuters who represent all classes of people. And you sort of get the idea of who it was that was using this original railroad by looking at the train schedule. The first trip from a place like Burlingame left at 9:30 in the morning, get up to San Francisco about 10, check in at the office, lunch at the club. The first train to leave San Francisco to get back down the peninsula, or rather the last train to get back down the peninsula, left at 4 o'clock. So these weren't hours for your normal worker up in San Francisco. These were for a certain class of people. Well, when did that start to change? It started to change with yet a new mode of transportation, and that included the streetcar. Now, the railroad in the 1870s to get from Burlingame up to San Francisco cost $1. That was a lot of money. But by the turn of the century, the streetcar allowed for round-trip tickets of 25 cents to get from a place like Burlingame up to San Francisco. Well, then we get to the era of the automobile. Okay, so this is another big deal. All right, remember we said the first commuter railroad? Well, the first stretch of highway built for the automobile on the West Coast was constructed between San Bruno and Burlingame back in 1912. Okay, now think about how important that is. We're ushering in now highways for automobiles for the first time. And of course, it's our adjacency to San Francisco that makes us the focus of this first bit of transportation history. So here they are. They're starting the construction. And the rest, as you can say, is history. And this one's an object theater. Now, when we discussed what we wanted to do in this space with our exhibit designers, they said to us, well, that's very, very ambitious. And unless you do it as an object theater, you're not going to be able to make that happen for you. And so we said, fine, but what's an object theater? Because we really didn't know. And so what we are wanting to do in here is we wanted to elaborate on these three phases of transportation history and how people became our suburbanites. So here, this is the railroad era, and the great tycoons that kind of had their huge estates on both sides of the tracks down the peninsula. And here we have the trolley car era. Trolley car reached all the way down to San Mateo by 1902. And in the far corner, mass construction during the automobile era.
Time. When you move down here, you can build the estate of your dreams. Any style and scale of architecture is yours for the asking. Grand staircases, chandeliers, intricate carvings, and paintings on every surface, with fountains, greenhouses, and formal gardens. There's every reason to experience life's finest pleasures after all.
But I'm not sure that everybody realizes that back in 1880, a third of the people of San Mateo County were born in another country. So immigration history is not just topical for us, it's also historical. And so that's what this gallery is all about. We call it the land of opportunity. We have some introductory messages here about immigration history in San Mateo County. And again, we have a lot of kids come through this gallery. It's of interest for school teachers and their students. And we have some object kind of lessons for them. Now, for example, this is one of our first. If you were coming to a new place and you had just one trunk, what would you bring with you? So that's what that's all about. And then in this corner, a lot of times, where you were from dictated what your occupation would be in the new place. So for example, if you were Japanese, you might be a flower grower right here in River City. Or if you were Italian, you might be a pig farmer up in Coleman. Or if you're Chinese, you might be fishing for shrimp down by the bay. In other words, where you were from might dictate what your occupation would be in a new place. And here's another one for the Italians. They were famous stone cutters back in the old country. And isn't this a beautiful piece that come out of home? This mural was done for us by a woman named Mona Perron, who in 2006 was a little known artist, but today is internationally famous. She paints the sides of buildings in Central and South America and has really become quite a sensation. But here what we've done is we've asked Mona if she could help us symbolize the experience, the immigrant experience here in San Mateo County with hands. And so we have a Maloney Indian who's handing down the experience of living on our beautiful peninsula to a Mexican vaquero, to a Chinese shrimp fisherman, to a Portuguese farmer, etc., etc. We also created these exhibit cases to some of the principal groups that had historical impact in San Mateo County. Italians are here, and this is the Irish case, this is the Japanese case. Each of these cases also have attached to them some sort of interactive. So here kids can toy with origami. This is the Chinese case, the Mexican case, and also the Filipino case. And that one with the beautiful gown there, that's Portuguese. So look at that gown. Isn't that something? So every year, many of your Woodside residents may understand that out of the coast, the Portuguese community have a festa. And so we wanted to pay homage to the festa, and we believe it's the oldest one on the West Coast. It goes all the way back to the 1870s. And here's some artifacts that the good Portuguese community has allowed us to display that speaks to that experience. Now, not everything is hunky-dory with immigrant experience. We certainly do know that. Here in this corner, we talk about various ways that the people have been discriminated against in their experience, and with particular emphasis on Chinese exclusion back in the 19th century and Japanese internment during World War II. Now, this might be the coolest part of the whole museum, because this allows our visitors to become part of the display. This is a camera and a microphone, and before COVID, we'd have a little chair here, and people can sit, and you can record in a 2-minute segment your own family's immigrant experience. It's recorded, it's reviewed by staff before it gets into the system, but then if you come back, you can visit one of those places, one of those pins, and you can see your experience or the experience of others that might be from the same place or from other places.
The San Mateo County History Museum has many other exhibits for you to experience and learn from, such as the Entrepreneurs Gallery. This shows the many different pioneers of various industries that have come from San Mateo County. You will recognize names such as Genentech, Intel, EA, Bank of America, and many others. The Entrepreneurs Gallery is set to be redone in the next couple of years, as it's currently 15 years old and its timeline stops in 2000. In the hallways, you'll find many photos for the Sports Hall of Fame. There's also an exhibit dedicated to the Maverick surfing competition. If you stand on this surfboard and look out the window, you are 40 feet above the square. That is about how high the surfers are on the waves during the Maverick competitions. You can also visit the old courtroom, which has been restored to look how it did in 1910. This was $1 million project with the funds mainly donated by the Gordon Moore family, because Gordon Moore's father, Walter Moore, worked in this courtroom. You can also visit the Charles Parsons Ships of the World exhibit.
While you're visiting here at the museum, you could come into our store where we have a lot of different kinds of things that might be of interest to you, including a lot of books about San Mateo County history that are for sale, and other kinds of knickknacks that many of you might enjoy
enjoy shopping. I'm also asked to remind you that you can rent the museum for special events. You can come here and you can have a wedding here or a corporate party. We would love to see you. Admission to the museum is $6 for adults, $4 for seniors and students, and it's free for 5 and under.
There is so much to do and learn at the San Mateo County History Museum. From the interactive exhibits to just the beautiful architecture, you really must visit to get the full experience.
Thank you, Mitch, for that very enlightening look at the museum and some fascinating facts about our local area. Now, I hope again that you will take a look at this, enjoy it, and then go and see it in person. It is often said that people go to museums to see beauty, but I think you can also go there and seek truth. So I recommend going to museums as often as you can. With the upcoming months where the weather will not necessarily be all that enchanting to go out and about walking or riding your bike, visiting a museum might not only warm your heart and keep you dry, but also enlighten and perhaps give you some good and amazing ideas to follow through. You know, Andy Warhol was quite interesting in that what he thought of museums. He said that when you think about it, department stores are a lot like museums. So I'm not sure I fully understand what Andy meant, but still an interesting statement. And I hope you will enjoy us next month when our First Friday turns to a more musical. So when we have a selection from the Gratham Museums, Gratham musicians. I have museums on my mind after Mitch's thing. I can't wait to go to the museum and see it again. It's been a while. So once again, thank you for joining us this evening and hope to see you around the museum. If not, at the next First Friday, where again, the Grathams, a group of musicians, not museums, will be presenting us. So take care, enjoy, and enjoy the holidays that are upcoming. So thank you. Good night. Stay safe. Stay well.